Hey guys, how are you all doing? This is the MMA breakdown with my predictions for UFC 168, Weidman versus Silva 2. You know what can I say? Legendary fight. Been waiting for this fight since the first one took place. Really stacked pay-per-view card. Some decent fights on the prelim card, but this is really all about the main event. But let's get right into it. Starting off on the online prelim card, featherweight Robbie Peralta taking on Esteban Payan. Payan, coming off of his UFC debut, lost to Jeremy Stephens. Didn't look impressive in that fight, just got dominated by Stephens. And Robbie Peralta, after a few strong knockout performances, dropped his last fight to Akira Corsani. Looked really flat there, but I have to go with Peralta. Seeing his knockout wins in the past, comes out on fire right out of the gate. Looks for that knockout early, even though he was flat in his last fight. I think he can get the knockout against Payan, who we still don't know a lot about, especially in the UFC. So I'm going to go with Peralta by first round knockout. Next up, at welterweight, William Macario versus Bobby Volker. Macario from Tough Brazil 2, he was a finalist, lost to Leonardo Santos, and this is his first fight since then. Pretty much a striker. From what I remember in the Tough House, I don't think we saw much of his ground game, but primarily a striker, has some power, although from what I remember seemed a bit reckless, a bit sloppy, not too technical. And then Bobby Volker, dropping his last few fights to Robbie Lawler, got knocked out, and then before that lost to Patrick Cote. I have to go with Macario here. I think he's, just being the younger talent, having more of an upside. And Volker, I don't think we're going to see too many changes in this game, although I'm sure he has the edge on experience here, but I'm going to go with Macario. I think he can finish Volker at some point, TKO. Next up, Fox Sports 1 prelim card, John Doomsday Howard taking on CR Bahadurzada at welterweight. Howard coming off of his very, I thought, unimpressive win over Uriah Hall, a very boring affair, and Bahadurzada dropped his last fight, getting dominantly out-grappled by Stun Gun Kim, and before that had a knockout win over Paulo Thiago. Still pretty green in the UFC. Howard has obviously been here before, was released by the UFC and then came back. I could see Howard making this a very grinded out style fight, a lot of clinching, a lot of in-close dirty boxing, going for the takedown. But his last fight, I just was not too impressed by it. And Bahadurzada, ever since that Paulo Thiago win, I've been waiting to see that power come back, and I have a feeling he might show that here. Although Howard has power himself, has had several knockout wins in the UFC before he got released. I could see either guy winning. I'm gonna say Bahadurzada by knockout late. Next up at featherweight, Dennis Siver taking on Manny the Anvil Gamburian. I've been unimpressed with Gamburian for a while, probably ever since his loss to Aldo back in the WEC. I think in the UFC he just never, got back to his contender status where he was in the WEC. I think he peaked with his win over Mike Brown way back. He had a win over Tyson Griffin. It wasn't too impressive, and another win over Omigawa, but just barely getting by in his wins. I think he's very tight with his boxing, and not meaning technical, but I think he doesn't let his hands go. He's not loose, and I just think in all of his fights, I just haven't been impressed with him, especially in his last fight with Cole Miller. He did beat him, but it came just very unimpressively. And let me pull up his record here to see who else he's beaten. Yeah, just Omigawa and Cole Miller. It's on a 2-fight win streak, but before that, lost to Diego Nunez. I actually lost to Tyson Griffin. I'm sorry. But yeah, he just he hasn't had that breakout performance yet in the UFC. Since he lost to Aldo, all of his fights have gone to decision. He can get the takedown on occasion. He can land some strikes, but never really does anything that really wows you. And Seaver, on the other hand, although he got finished in his last fight against Cub Swanson, he really impressed me in that fight. And I think Cub Swanson's one of the top contenders at 145, and he was really handling him early on. He was big and strong, taking him down. Swanson couldn't get him off of him, and his striking looked really good in that fight as well. He's got really strong kickboxing. We've seen the finishing power from him. He can finish with the spinning back kicks, the unorthodox stuff. I really like Seaver in this fight. I think he fights with a lot more. He fights he strikes at a higher volume than Gambarian. I think he pushes a harder pace, so I have to go with Seaver here. Next up, a lightweight, Gleison Tibau versus Michael Johnson. Two guys who've been up and down in their UFC careers. Gleison Tibau, every time he looks like he starts to put a streak together, he'll drop a decision. Does not throw at a high volume at all. This Gleison Tibau, very kind of methodical, fights at a pretty slow pace. He has had a few finishes where he's kind of turned up the heat and looked impressive. But that last win against Varner is doing well early, kind of faded late, let Varner take over. But in that Nurmagomedov fight, Tibau was content to just sit back and kind of let Nurmagomedov throw at a higher volume and kind of outpoint him on the feet. I think that's what we're going to see here. Johnson's an active striker. He's shown power on his feet. Knocked out Danny Castillo with looked like a jab with not much behind it, but put him out cold. And he's also dropped Reza Madadi in their fight, although he lost that, and TKO'd Edward Falaloto a while back. So we know Johnson's capable on the feet, and of course in his last fight dominating Joe Lozon. Johnson has shown a big weakness though in his game, defending the takedown. Got out-grappled badly by Miles Jury, and even Reza Madadi was able to take him down and submit him. Tibau does have a decent wrestling game. Doesn't have quite the submission game of well, I don't know. I don't see him submitting Johnson, but I do think he could take him down and hold him there, win a decision. Tibau does have a bit of power on occasion, but he doesn't throw at a high enough volume where we see that power too often. I like Johnson to outpoint him, although Johnson I think is a bit of a head case and dropped a few fights that I definitely think he should have won, like against Miles Jury, and just the way he lost against Jury looked like he didn't even want to be there, just taken down repeatedly and held down for the whole round. And then losing to Reza Madadi I think was just a bizarre loss, getting submitted by him. So I think Johnson is a bit of a head case, and depends where his head is at. But if he fights to his potential, I like him to outpoint T-Bell on the feet, possibly hurt him. So I'm going with Johnson there. And the last fight on the prelim card, Chris Lieben taking on Uriah Hall. Chris the Crippler Lieben. I think Lieben's time is done in the UFC. His last fight against Andrew Craig, lost a decision. I thought he was doing okay though in that fight, and came out with a really different game plan than we've seen from him before. He was pressing Craig up against the cage and actually doing a pretty good job of it, doing a lot of clinch work. But he did get dropped in that fight, which was kind of a big tell for me. I can't remember the last time this guy was dropped. And, Craig came close to knocking him out, putting him out. And, that makes me think a guy like Uriah Hall, even though he's, been very, lackluster, he's really held back in his past few fights. We obviously know he can be very dangerous on the feet. He's got big power, and I just think the speed is just going to be way too much for Lieben. I do think Hall, if he has his head screwed on right, I think he's going to be able to put Lieben's lights out. Although if Hall, comes in hesitant like he has in his past few fights, not willing to engage, not throwing, as many combinations and strikes as he's capable of, I do think Lieben can press the action, push forward, keep Hall up against the fence, and possibly win a decision. But I will go with Hall. I do think he can get the early knockout. Next up, onto the main card, at featherweight, Dustin the Diamond Poirier taking on Diego Brandao. I like Poirier big here. I honestly don't see how Brandao is going to win this. I think Brandao has been slightly overrated since coming in the UFC. I really liked his win over Dennis Bermudez back in the TUF 15, I think, finale. Since then, he's had a few impressive performances. The one I remember most clearly is the win over Pablo Garza. Again, the arm triangle submission there. But he's also had some pretty poor performances. Darren Elkins, getting, after having a dominant first round, fading and getting beat there. Even his last fight against Daniel Pineda, got put in a lot of bad spots and faded badly towards the end of that fight. And also when the fight against Joey Gambino, while he won that fight, I just thought he was way too hesitant, and never really let his hands go when he was clearly winning and not being threatened. So I think Brandao, has a problem managing his power. Either blows his wad early and then fades hard, or he's just too hesitant and doesn't let go, doesn't let his hands go. And also, I think he has a big conditioning problem. Poirier, on the other hand, a lot of experience fighting top guys. Gave Cub Swanson probably his toughest fight that Swanson's had in his win streak here. In his last fight against Eric Koch, showed a new facet to his game, showed big power, knocking Koch down on the feet in that fight. We hadn't seen that from Poirier. He's had a couple submission wins. He has a real good Darce choke. Has a decent takedown. We saw that against Max Holloway. Also saw the real crafty jiu-jitsu there, pulling off a mounted triangle armbar. Has a big experience advantage also. Fought the Korean Zombie. And, Brandao, he's had several fights under his belt since coming off the Ultimate Fire, but I feel he's still pretty green, and I just think this is, Poirier is just too much for him at this point. I like Poirier to finish him. I think early, first or second round. I think he can do it on the feet. On the ground, I also think Poirier, I don't know if he'll submit him, but I like him to be in control on the ground. I don't think Brandao's a bad fighter. I just think he has some big holes to do his game. He needs to shore up right now. Like I said, the conditioning and managing his power. He's young and talented, but Poirier I think he's a top 10 guy, easily a featherweight and a contender. So I think Poirier's gonna dominate Brandao here. Next up at lightweight, Jim Miller taking on Fabricio Camoys. I like Miller doing a decision, but for a long time I considered Jim Miller an elite guy at lightweight, top 5. His only losses for a while were to Frankie Edgar and Gray Maynard, number 1 and 2 guys at that time in the lightweight division. Got finished by Nate Diaz, and so then at that point I was like, okay, this guy can only be beaten by number 1 and 2 and then the next top contender. But then his last fight against Pat Healy, got choked unconscious, and I think that was kind of his the tipping point in Miller's career and where I placed him in the division. He went from being a guy who I thought going to lose to top contenders, and now he lost a fight to a guy who wasn't an already established contender. And I thought Pat Healy, after that win, was going to go on to be a top contender, but we've seen dropped his last 2 fights, and especially the last one against Bobby Green wasn't too impressive. So I think Miller's kind of open up the gate, so to speak, to his he's shown he can be beaten now by guys who aren't right there at the top. So I do give I think there's a chance that Camoys can pull this off, but I still think Miller's good enough to win this fight. Miller, real aggressive with his submissions. He'll go for standing arm triangles, leg locks. He'll pull guard, do crazy stuff. Real aggressive on the feet. Showed that in the Joe Lozon fight. Not the most technical, not the most powerful striker, but very tenacious, very aggressive on the feet. He'll be in your face. And Camoys, I don't know. I don't think he seems like too great a striker. I've only seen a handful of his fights in the UFC. I know way back he lost to Kurt Pellegrino, got released, I think, and then came back and took on Melvin Gillard. Was able to get Gillard in some bad positions in that fight, even mounted him. And before that, I think he choked out Tommy Hayden, who is a pretty low-level UFC fighter, but he's obviously, his strengths are on the ground. He's got good jiu-jitsu. Probably technically he's got better jiu-jitsu than Jim Miller, but I do think on the ground Miller can be in control. I think he can be on top. I give Camoys a slight chance to pull off the upset, but I think Miller will decision him. I think he's better on the feet and has a little bit better control on the ground. Next up at heavyweight, Josh the War Master Barnett taking on Travis Happa Brown. Barnett coming off of his TKO win of Frank Mir, and Brown coming off of his come-from-behind knockout of Alistair Overeem. I like Travis Brown. Not big, but I think he's younger, got more of an upside, and I think he's got bigger power than Barnett. I think that's pretty obvious. Barnett hasn't had a knockout win in a long time. Josh Barnett is a technician. He'll get that takedown. He doesn't go crazy, likes to conserve energy, and he'll work for that, his signature head and arm choke that he's gotten on a few guys in the past few years. I think Barnett's a bit slow on the feet. I think he's definitely slower than Travis Brown, although in his last fight, tying up with Frank Mir and just throwing him on the fence was pretty impressive. I'm not sure if he can do that to Brown. Brown likes to use a lot of movement, hops around, jumps in and out. When I think of Brown, I always remember that crazy knockout he had on Stefan Struve. He's using a lot of movement and then just hopped in and threw that big overhand, knocked Struve out. I like Brown to land the knockout punch. I do think Barnett could handle him on the ground if he can get him there. I like this fight. It's close, it's interesting, but got to make my pick, and I'm going to take Brown by knockout early. Next up, women's bantamweight championship fight, Rousey versus Miesha Tate. You got to go with Rousey, first round submission. I just think she's so good with her judo, getting people to the ground and getting that armbar. And she's done it to Tate already before. And Tate, you got to remember, she didn't really earn this fight. You know, she lost to Kat Zingano, and she got finished by her. So it's not like she, put together a win streak or even, won a fight to get here. And I'm not saying she shouldn't be, fighting Rousey. Obviously, Zingano couldn't take the fight, and they needed someone to fill in. And I do think Miesha Tate is a top contender in the very thin women's bantamweight division, but I don't really see what she can do differently against Rousey. Obviously, she's a good wrestler, good grappler. She was dominating early on against Zingano and was actually impressed. Good top control and good ground and pound. But I just think with Rousey, it's that judo game that people don't know how to deal with. And, she's an Olympic level athlete in judo. And really, there hasn't been anyone else really in UFC history, maybe going back to the way early days, but in the modern era, maybe Carl Parisian was the next best judo fighter in the UFC, but he wasn't obviously not a champion, maybe at one time a top contender, but in the big picture wasn't really a top MMA fighter. And Ronda Rousey is the top MMA fighter. She's a champion, and she's got that incredible Olympic level judo. I know Carmouche took her back, and a lot of people are pointing to that as kind of a hole in her judo game, but I just think Rousey is too good with her takedowns, her judo takedowns. It's not like she gets everyone down, but it's for her opponents, it's not like defending a double leg or wrestling takeout. It's something completely different that they're not accustomed to, and I don't think Miesha Tate's gonna be able to stop it. And that's really where Rousey is dominating everyone, is her judo and her armbar. So I like her to pull that off again in the first round. And the main event for the middleweight title, Chris Weidman taking on Anderson Silva. I mean, what an important fight. Maybe the biggest fight in UFC history. The first fight was so crazy. Where do you even start? Where do you even begin to analyze this fight? I think the biggest thing for me when analyzing this fight, where is Silva mentally? How's he going to react to a loss? I mean, 7 years being the champion and just getting knocked out cold. That's got to do something to you mentally, or maybe it doesn't. I don't know how Silva's going to come back from this. Is he going to come back with his usual, dancing around, his, the what do you call it? The movement and the showboating. Is he going to be doing that stuff again, which has proven to be really effective for him at times? Is he going to come back with that, or is he going to come back just focused and get down to business, going right after Weidman? I don't know. And if he takes either of those two paths, how is Weidman going to react to that? I think Weidman is still super hungry even after winning the belt. I think he realizes how huge this is. I think he realizes how bad it'll look if Silva just goes out there and clowns him. I think he's working super hard, and I think he has an amazing team back there. Amazing team who has broken down Silva's game, broken it down scientifically. This isn't Forrest Griffin, Dan Henderson, Okami guys in the past, just going in there, just trying to, out muscle, or, just bringing their skill set to the table, thinking, they're gonna beat Anderson. Weidman really figured out Silva, being able to land that crazy combination where he threw the right hand and then the backhand to get Silva off balance, so he'd be on the side of his left hook to land that. That was very scientific, very technical, and those are the kind of guys that Weidman's working with. I think that's a big advantage for him, and a big reason for why he won the first fight. Obviously, there were some very nervous moments for Weidman there, and Silva was doing the showboating and able to reel off a few strikes. Although Weidman, I think defensively was very good, very different from anyone Silva's fought before, able to evade a lot of Silva strikes, get out of striking distance, and coming back in, making Silva miss. Weidman was good with the takedown early. I don't know how Silva's gonna fight here if he comes back with the showboating. I think Silva's best chance of winning is if he can get Weidman to do the showboating with him like he did in the first fight. Weidman said he did that to try to get into Silva's head like he was trying to do to him. I think that's a terrible game plan, though. I don't think he wants to start doing that again with Silva. I think Silva starts to showboat. He's going to be much quicker to throw his strikes. He's not going to showboat as much. Going to be much more focused on creating an opening to throw his strikes. And Silva does have one-shot knockout power. So I think that's Weidman's best chance of losing the fight, is if he starts to showboat and do the head movement, leaving his head out there, leaving his hands down in front of Silva. But otherwise, I think Weidman could press the action, come straight forward, take Silva down, and I think, if I'm just guessing, I think that's how this fight's kind of going to go. I think he'll be able to do that for a few rounds. Silva just maybe being more aggressive, and Weidman coming forward, getting the takedown, working some ground and pound like he was doing early on. And if he's able to do that for a few rounds, I think he can kind of frustrate, weaken Silva over 3 or 4 rounds and really turn it on late. But I wouldn't be one bit surprised if Anderson Silva just came out there and knocked out Weidman in the first round. But the first fight was just so crazy. It's really hard to predict how this fight's going to go, but got to make my pick. And Weidman won the first fight, knocked him out, and while Silva definitely did not put himself in the best position to win that fight, you definitely have to give credit to Weidman through that very technical combination to get Silva off balance and land that strike. And I think Weidman's still super hungry, super motivated to really solidify his status as champion. So I'm going to go with Weidman, but again, I really wouldn't be surprised if Silva just knocks him out. Very important fight for Silva's legacy, and very important fight for the future of the UFC going forward. If Weidman wins, there's a whole new era. Silva wins, we can write that first fight off as kind of a fluke, not a complete fluke, but he'll have redeemed himself. But anyway, huge fight. So those are my predictions for UFC 168, Weidman versus Silva 2. Thanks a lot for watching, guys. Really appreciate it. If you would subscribe, leave your comments down below if you want to challenge me on any of my picks, or leave your thoughts for any of these fights. But thanks a lot for watching, guys. Take care, and I'll be back with a review for this card early next week. See you guys.